So, my name is Michael Randolph, and I'm with the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. And what we do is to provide technical assistance to nonprofits. Tonight, we're going to talk about part of our training having to do with CEO training. Tonight's CEO training is going to focus on Community Comprehensive Initiative. That is, how do you transform poor communities? We focus on providing strategies to transforming poor communities where you have a low income, high crime, and high violent, high dropout rates from high school, high rates of homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse, where the rate of unemployment is very high, as well as the high school rate is very high. And also there's a high rate of health issues. In short, we work in those poor communities that have all of those negative incomes and negative indicators that make that community a poor community. Now the phone would have to ring. So let me continue on with the presentation. We specifically work with residents in those communities to provide them with the skill set to change their community from a bottom-up approach. So tonight, I got Kimberly with me. I want to introduce Kimberly. Kimberly is one of the students that's taken the CEO training. Let me see if I can get Kimberly to come in. Kimberly, can you come in? Can you unmute yourself?
Hi, how you doing, Mr. Michael?
Excellent. Kimberly, tell us about you, who you are. What's the name of your organization?
The name of our organization is Generations Renewed, and we are a community development corporation based in Plant City, Florida.
Okay, why did you start your nonprofit?
We started our nonprofit really pretty much because I raised my children. I raised 4 young people in a community that was lacking a lot of things. There was no support, there was no education planning, there was really no foundation other than myself that was trying to work every day and trying to keep my kids focused. And so there was no help in the community. So as we grew up and as I grew up, as my kids grew up, we decided once they became adults that we did not want to see the next generation of young people fall by the wayside. My kids survived because we had each other and we had other people in the community that pulled together and spoke into their lives. So what we did as a family is my young people, my 20-somethings, I have 4 20-somethings that now they've taken on the task of speaking into the lives of other young people of other generations where there's drugs and low income and no jobs and all of those things. We decided that at some point we wanted to reach back and make a difference in our community, the community that my kids grew up in, and really the community that I grew up in. So
Kimberly, let me just jump in for 1 second. Now, your community consists of both rural and urban, or what is the makeup? Do you have both rural area as well as urban, or what?
We have both rural because we live in Plant City, Florida, which is a rural area, and then we have within that we have the urban, an urban community that's wrapped around that. So yes, it's rural and urban.
Good. And I think one of the concerns coming from you and our discussion was the sense that African Americans in that community didn't really have a voice, that things were going on and they didn't really have a voice as to what was going on. And your nonprofit, the main focus is to curate that voice for the voiceless, to give them voice. And that's pretty much what we do. We work with folks like yourself in poor communities that feel that things are going on and they don't have a say in what's going on. We work with them to create the infrastructure to make changes in their community. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to unmute you again. I'm going to mute you again, and then I'm going to unmute you when we come to that section for questions.
Okay.
Okay, now this thing doesn't want to move on me. There we go. So just to give a little bit of information about us. Again, we are the Center for Nonprofit and Community Development. We got started in 2011. The primary reason why I started this organization is because I come from Baltimore, specifically Sandtown, Winchester community in West Baltimore. And the things that we talked about earlier about crime and drugs, all of that was in my neighborhood. And unfortunately, residents didn't really have a voice in what went on in their community. It was always the powers to be that determined what should happen and what shouldn't happen. And most times that resulted in poor communities being in the same condition. So we specialize in developing neighborhood planning and economic development initiatives, specifically in poverty-stricken communities, poor communities. And we do this by creating national and best practice models. To date, we work with over 1,800 nonprofits, faith-based groups, individuals, and others. The model that we're going to talk about now is currently being duplicated in 10 other states. So let's talk about what we do, the model. The model that we're looking at in terms of the legal structure and the organizational structure, the legal structure is what's known as a 501c3. That gives you the ability to bring in money. The organizational structure is what's called a community development corporation. We're going to talk a little bit more about what a community development corporation looks like. The next part of the model is dealing with the approach and scope. We work with creating a bottom-up, community-driven strategy that gives the community the power to design and implement their own plan. And we do this by using what we call a community comprehensive initiative. The different components of that initiative is comprehensive, holistic, and integrated. The legal structure. A 501c3 is a designation given to organization by way of IRS. The importance of a 501c3 status is the ability to be tax exempt and to bring in funding for your organization using that status. Organizational structure. The organizational structure that has been proven as a best practice in terms of transforming communities is what's known as a community development corporation. Community development corporations are nonprofit, community-based organizations that focus on revitalizing the community. CDCs play a critical role in terms of bringing together community wealth for key reasons. And the key reason is that they anchor capital in communities by developing residential and commercial property, ranging from affordable housing to shopping centers. This is how community development corporations are able to transform their community. Now, at least 1/3 of the board of a CDC should be community residents. And the CDC works to enhance the conditions oftentimes involved in neighborhood organizing, which is a critical process to empower residents and building what we call political power. The federal government designates a CDC as a private nonprofit corporation governed by a board of directors consisting of residents of the community. What's so critical about this designation as a community development corporation is that it allows nonprofits to get monies by way of the federal government, by way of what's known as the federal economic development, economic development funding. And that's designated for CDCs to do infrastructure projects like shopping malls, like affordable housing. So what's the approach and scope to actually transforming poor communities? Well, first of all, we use what's known as a community comprehensive initiative. A community comprehensive initiative focuses on how do you begin to transform poor communities using a multifaceted approach. We're going to give a breakdown as to what that looked like. But what's important, the model we use is what's known as a community comprehensive initiative. In order to bring the comprehensive initiative into play, we put together what's known as a strategic plan. The strategic plan is what is used in order to bring about the vision and the mission. Now, a strategic plan determines where the organization is going to be over the next year or more. Normally, the next 5 years. Let's look at what does a strategic plan consist of. It consists of a vision statement, a mission statement, value statement, symptoms, and the symptoms is the problem, what's wrong, diagnosis, the reason for the problem. Then you put together themes from the diagnosis, the gaps, the overall strategy, the principle, the goal, your objectives, your strategies, your action steps, responsibility and resources, and timetables and budget. So a little bit later on, we're going to look at what does that look like. The most critical component to being able to control what happens in your community is to understand the concept of power. We're going to talk about power from the perspective of capital, social capital, financial capital, strategic, human, political. All of these different types of capital go into creating what we talk about power. In order to be able to make a change in your neighborhood, you have to have what's known as power. We're going to talk about that in class. What does power look like and how do you create power? Now, here's a breakdown of what the strategic plan look like. Let's look at the top. The top of the plan, first, let me talk about this particular plan, which is the West Tampa CDC plan. Now, the West Tampa CDC employs a multi-dimensional, comprehensive, integrated, place-based, and holistic approach to community revitalization. What does that mean? Well, it starts with the idea that the community should be in the control seat. That being the case, the community then brings on board the CDC or any particular community. And the CDC is responsible for acting on behalf of the community. And in order to bring about that change in the community, the CDC brings together strategic partners of the nonprofits, government agencies, the private sector, and institutions of higher learning. We talked about a comprehensive, holistic approach. That's what we call strategy. From this partnership, we bring about a strategy that includes economic development, social development, and physical development. Economic development focuses on jobs and help people in the community getting jobs. Social development has to do with people problems, youth problems, seniors, health problems. Physical has to do with affordable housing and space, open space in the community. So it becomes a comprehensive approach that looks at the economic, social, and physical components that makes up a community that builds infrastructure. This differs from most community comprehensive initiatives in that it is combined with all three components of infrastructure: economic, social, and physical. So what does that look like in terms of your critical component? Let's look at economic development. Economic development focuses on monetary capital, that is, building a marketable workforce. When you look in your neighborhood, you identify what are those things that are keeping residents from getting jobs, and how do we build the skill sets to build a marketable workforce. This is where your job training and job placement comes into place. The next thing is, how do you assist new businesses and existing businesses in the community with a focus on creating resident-owned businesses? The other component is creating community wealth. How do you create community revenue in order to fund the project? Social capital has to do with community building and networking, enhancing the quality of life of residents, and improving social services. Coming back over to capital, physical capital includes transportation, land use, and community land use and neighborhood condition. So all of these that you're looking at consists of what we consider to be the critical components to putting together a strategy that transforms communities. This model, again, is being used in 10 states, and we plan to move it to 20 states, hopefully by the end of the year. In order to sustain any particular initiative, you have to be able to have funds. And what we created, this model right here, shows how we plan to finance it. It's called social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is the ability to fund the future of nonprofits through a combination of earned income, social contributions, and private sector subsidies. The earned income is used to pursue social objectives by simultaneously seeking both financial and social return on your investment. There are 4 areas that we're going to talk about: input, output, outcome, and benefits. Of course, input is how does money come into the organization. Here where we focus on grants and other social media fundraising. The other way we bring in money is fee for services, development fees if you're going to do affordable housing, consultant fees, and own and operate your own community business. That's another way of being sustainable, being able to use money from grants to create your own nonprofit business within your nonprofit. The other focus is investment sustainability. And when we say investment financial security, what we mean is that invested in stocks and bonds, so you always have monies coming back in order to keep your fund, your operation. So if you invest in stocks, those dividends every year come back to provide monies for your nonprofit. Not only stocks, but bonds of any type of financial instruments that you can use to invest in and bring back money to the organization. And the output is where the money goes to. It goes to fund employment program, public safety, youth programs, community building, affordable housing, and neighborhood revitalization. The outcome as a result of what CDCs do is that it increases employment, increase affordable housing, reduce crime, and improve the quality of life. The benefits coming from a strategy like this is it increases the tax base. It reduces the services needed in the city, including public safety. It reduces the risk to lenders. It increases the return on investment, and it creates a better quality of life. This approach that looks at how do you transform neighborhoods is based on the best practice, lesson learned strategies on how do we first transform community, and more importantly, how do we provide community residents with the tools to change that neighborhood and create their own table to transform their community. Now, if anybody's looking at this presentation and you need to reach us, feel free to do so. You can hit us at, these are our phone numbers here in Tampa and Baltimore and New York. And you also can connect to us on the internet. So at the end of the day, it is all about working with neighborhoods and communities to transform them, to put them in a position so that they can create their own vision and dream. If I had not had gone through my life and living in a poor community and known how poor people are big business, because people come in to plan for us, but yet the poor communities look the same. And the reason why is because they don't want the type of training that we have to get out to regular people on how to take control of your community.